Even as a caged bird is unable to find freedom, the ignorant man devoted to the fulfillment of his appetites is unable to find release from bondage. His mind, which is befuddled with apparently countless tendencies and conditioning, is unable to see clearly the revolving wheel of life and death. I suppose this talk of fetish and now bondage does make one wonder about those who are exploring their sexuality. And I'm certainly not going to make any moral judgment about that, and why should we? We're not in the business of making moral judgments. Exploring sexuality is part of inquiring into yourself, inquiring into your own nature, and it's a perfectly appropriate thing to do, as long as you're not inflicting it on anybody else, not damaging anybody else or yourself. In order to capture and hold in bondage the ignorant person, his own infatuation spreads out throughout the world a whole network of illusory relationships. This can very often happen, can't it? You can be infatuated with somebody, you can be in love with them, you believe that they're in love with you, you build up a complete fantasy about this person, which has got nothing to do with them and who they are, and who you are in relation to them. And very often the consequences of such things are quite tragic. With a small piece of flesh, the eyes, the foolish man sees a little particle of earth which he regards as mountains, lakes, forests and cities. This is our story-making faculty coming in again. We create stories. We create stories about the world, but we create massive stories about our relationships with others. Ignorance is a mighty tree which has spread its branches in all directions, creating countless leaves of illusory objects. Normally we talk about this in a purely prosaic sense, about notions of the world, notions of itself, but the real notions that we've got to deal with are notions of relationships, which involve very deep psychological habits and patterns and very powerful emotions, very often very destructive, powerful emotions like jealousy and power games and all the rest of it. So ignorance is like a mighty tree which has spread its branches in all directions, creating countless leaves of illusory objects and relationships with these objects and people. On that tree dwell numerous birds, like ever so many experiences of pleasure of the ignorant. Birds are its leaves, actions are its buds, merit and demerit are the fruits, wealth and auspiciousness are its flowers. This ignorance is like the moon which rises when the sun of wisdom has set. Repeated bursts are the rays of the moon, and this ignorance is the lord of defects and imperfection. Tendencies and habits are the nectarine rays showered by this moon. The birds of hope and desire drink of this nectar. In the darkness of ignorance, the fool thinks he experiences pleasure or happiness in the objects of this world. The external appearance of sweetness in the objects is caused by ignorance. For all these objects have a beginning and an end. They are limited, they are perishable. So when we're caught up in a relationship, even if we've fallen in love, we should try and get some kind of perspective on it. We can enjoy it. There's no reason why we shouldn't enjoy such things. But we're usually led by the nose, not really knowing where we're going or what we're getting into. And pain usually follows. All such situations provide us with a challenge, and that challenge is our own self-knowledge. The challenge is to be centered in yourself and not centered out there. I've often spoken of how the attention is hijacked how it's hijacked onto notions in the same way that our attention is focused on the television screen while the drama's unfolding there. But it's more powerful than that. Our attention is hijacked by relationships. Our emotional centre is actually even removed from here and put out there. We need to reclaim our emotional centre, reclaim our attention. And this doesn't mean that we become cold to relationships. We're actually in the best situation for being in a relationship because we're not investing in a notion of somebody else. We can take somebody on board as they are, rather than how our infatuation might lead us to believe that they are. Because infatuation is only ever infatuation with our own notions, with our own fetishistic desires. It's very rarely got anything to do with who that other person really is.